Redditors who have been in prison, what's the most disturbing thing you've seen or heard in prison? Saw a guy get hogtied, had his clothes cut off of him and was scrubbed with a toilet brush for refusing to take showers too many days in a row. 5 guys beating the living crap out of each other over a cigarette. Not a pack, just one fucking cigarette. That's as much about the excuse as anything. If it wasn't a cigarette, it'd be something else. Kettling is big in UK prisons. Mixing sugar and boiling water to make a napalm-like substance to throw or pour on people. Hands down though, the worst thing I personally saw was when I worked as a violence reduction buddy. I talked to a man in isolation who had sliced himself all over with a razor blade and was rubbing his shit into the cuts. My husband's childhood babysitter allegedly kettled a pedo in Berlin. My father-in-law considered this a good qualification for watching children. I was in county jail, but in a rough part of Southern California. We had triple-stack bunk beds in general population in just a large, open room. I had a middle bunk and oftentimes at night guys would try to stealthily jerk off. The bed shaking is a dead giveaway, and usually you just try to ignore it. Well, one night I'm reading and the bed started shaking vigorously, which is not how you do it. As I was putting my book down to tell this dude knock it off, he fell off his bunk and cracked his skull open on the concrete floor. He had a seizure on the top bunk and fell down about 7 feet straight to the concrete head first. That was a gnarly sight to see. Edit, I really didn't think this needed to be said since it spelled out for you guys. He was not masturbating. The shaking from his bunk was the seizure, which led him to rolling off and landing head first. Holy shit. What happened afterwards? My buddy was a nurse at a prison. He told me a guy had to go to infirmary because an inmate held him down and raped him in his colostomy bag hole. Somewhere else in this thread I read a reply that someone in prison was basically selling out their colostomy hole and got some kind of STD in it. Brazil. Once the lights went out you'd start hearing scraping noises on the concrete. It was gang members sharpening their homemade knives on the concrete floor. Somebody was about to get killed when you heard that noise. Stuff straight out of hell. Thought of this gives me chills, holy shit. Some of the behaviors from those suffering from mental health issues were pretty disturbing. Inmates covering themselves in fecal matter or smearing it all over their cell was not entirely uncommon. Saw an inmate cover himself head to toe and also bite wounds into his wrists and pack those with shit. One inmate cut a testicle out and slapped it against the cell window when the CO walked by. I've never been to prison, but I spent a few days in the max security level of a psych ward and then several years later, got to spend the weekend in jail. Jail was disturbingly reminiscent of the psych ward. Legit crazy people who not faking but schizophrenic or something else wrong. Feel sorry for them cause other inmates will fuck them up. Dude sitting there rambling to himself every waking moment and guards just let the nutcase in Gen Pop to irritate everyone until someone shuts him up. Lots of crazy people need to be somewhere else but Gen Pop. Oh, and I was in group therapy and this dude had a ball in his hand when talking and I figured it was like something he got from commissary. Don't think much of it, then someone comes up to him holding a trash can. It was a ball of his own shit. I had a student who played with a ball of her own shit. She was laughing and giggling to herself and playing with something. So another staff member asked to see it and she dropped it into her hand. A rolled up ball of shit. Same student took off all her clothes and ran down the hall naked while she was on her period. When an aide tried to stop her, she hit the aide in the head with her pad. One of the most gifted kids I've ever worked with. She never made a single grammatical mistake. Had an enormous vocabulary. And she was extraordinarily creative, but she'll never be functional in the real world and that's really sad. Guy mixed scalding hot water and hair grease, set it on fire and threw it on a female officer. Didn't see this one, but a female officer got stabbed to death confiscating a pair of shoes. What's up with the specifically female officer things? Is that more or less unusual or something? Just curious because I haven't seen any other comments mention the officers much at all and no mention of gender. My relative, Russia, Soviet times mafia, told me that one of his cellmates used a mug and a nail and hammered his scrotum to a chair just to get to the hospital to evade being killed. That's the spirit. He really couldn't think of any other way to injure himself that would have been less painful. In the prison I was in, the inmates had a policy that sex offenders were not allowed to masturbate, find any sexual relief. I was surprised how seriously they took it. They'd assign people to take shifts watching over the person, check their bunk every day for semen stains, etc. Some of them would purposefully try to break rules to get sent to solitary just to do it, but even the officers seemed to be in on it, and wouldn't send them there. The worst for me were the dietary punishments. There was that court ruling years ago that Nutriloaf is not cruel/unusual punishment, and there's no requirement that prison food be appealing to eat, as long as it's safe. So since then, these sort of punishments got worse and worse. If you weren't a model inmate, your food basically looked and smelled like stale canned cat food. They'd mix it with vinegar too, to make it even harder to stomach. I had to eat Nutriloaf for 2 weeks straight while on lockdown. I didn't eat for the first 2 or 3 days. I was so hungry that I had no choice to eat it. It's the most disgusting shit in the world. I was in jail in Jackson, Michigan for 3 months and someone in my pod area had a partial tail. It was about 3 inches long right above his ass crack and it moved. Freaked me the fuck out. Lamau. That reminds me of the movie Shallow Hal. 13 years in state and federal prison here and indicted under the Federal RICO Act. Seeing people knowing spreading diseases as a form of punishment or attack on other groups of people. Note I have been free and clear of any supervision for over 4 years now without any incidents. None. I changed my life and have never looked back. How TF did you catch a RICO? Odds can be pretty rough, especially the first fentanyl one you see. But you get used to them. Drugs suck, man. Suicides. Self-harm can be nasty. Second night I was in, I heard officers screaming disengage over and over, and I looked at my cellie who had been down for 20 years for murder. What was going on? He told me that when they catch a couple of guys doing the deed they scream that to get them to stop. This same cellie started to growl like a dog at my foot while I was laying on the top bunk and then pretended to bite at my foot. When he did this, my toe went into his mouth, which caused him to gag. One time during count, these two guys started to make tattoo ink by burning baby oil, but they threw water onto it when it got too big and it spread all over their cell, so they were locked in the cell with flames covering the walls with them locked in it. They were about to get out in a couple of months but ended up getting a 10-year sentence for arson after the incident. The thing about him growling at you and then gagging cause your toe went in his mouth is kinda hilarious. Probably seeing the lengths people will go to in order to get opioid replacement therapy like Boop or Suboxone. In order to either sell to someone else or because they're being intimidated to give their dosage to someone. Inmates have to swallow the liquid in front of a guard and nurse obviously, but they have figured out ways around this, creating little paper catchments and sticking them in their throat, or just being empty-stomached and vomiting it up when they get back to their cells. Wait. So they harvest their own vomited Suboxone and sell/give it to someone else? I worked in psych at a max security prison. I was the one who wrote the notes for the parole board making release suggestions. So perhaps if people want to be released, they shouldn't tell me all the gory details about how they want to cut my sweet mouth off then skull fuck me after I'm dead. The scary thing was seeing how often they were released. Person shrugging, /U200D, female sign. I used to be a correctional officer in Singapore, where judicial caning is still used as a punishment for certain crimes and prison offenses. I never had to carry it out myself, but I saw it plenty of times among the inmates. They would act like they're not scared of it. It's not a big deal, etc. to save face. But privately, in the caning room, they're caned in private, not in front of other inmates. I've never seen anything that can make hardened criminals break down and cry like the cane can. For those who don't know, it's a lot more severe than Sharia whipping used in many countries. That is more for humiliation, while caning is for causing maximum pain. I saw grown men cry, beg, plead, throw up, even pass out from the pain. They have to keep a doctor on hand. Smaller offenders who got 3 strokes would be okay though, after a miserable week or 2. Rapists who got the 24-stroke maximum, though, were never the same. I remember years ago seeing a news report about some tourist idiot had gotten arrested for spray painting graffiti on some random cars or something, and the punishment was caning. I don't remember how many strokes he was supposed to get, but I do remember them showing the cane wielder practicing on a punching bag, and holy shit did I never want to be on the receiving end. Guy was pretty much striking the bag like a martial artist splitting a skull with a bow staff. Saw a guy warm up a coffee cup full of baby oil and then walk up to another prisoner and threw it in his face. Dude's face looked like it was melting off because he tried to rub it off. The dude owed like $10 over some ramen noodles and said he wasn't going to pay. 2 things get you fucked up in prison: debt and respect. Spent a year at a minimum security prison farm in the South. I thought it would be a better experience due to less violence. But it's hell. I had to spend 50 hours a week cleaning huge pig barns and chicken coops, preparing slop for the pigs out of the most repulsive restaurant/grocery waste that was dumped on site every week. We got almost no visitors because we all stunk so bad. If you broke prison rules, you'd lose shovel privileges, which was its own special hell. You'd still get thin gloves to muck pig pens with, to meet minimum safety requirements, but no shovel. New arrivals who were city boys, like me, often threw up a ton their first week. Is this in the US? That's crazy. Witnessed a few people being beaten or stabbed to death, but one of the more weird things was a guy that would inject his bladder full with fake urine in order to pass drug tests. He'd use a sports bottle filled with urine-colored water and force the nozzle into the tip of his cock and then relax plus squeeze the bottle. Lol. Hello UTI. Not me, but my brother. He was in and out of jail for a few months at a time for a number of reasons. Happy to say he's sober, out of a toxic relationship, and thriving now. But I remember the way he described the echo of screams and moans from the mentally ill people in the pitch black was so unnerving. It made me feel sad and terrified all in one, especially since the dark is one of my biggest fears. I spent a few days in a holding cell. I wasn't eating, going to the bathroom, nor was I offered a shower the whole time. I couldn't pass my health exam due to a fever, so I was never moved to Gen Pop. The drunk asshole in the cell next to me screamed for I swear the entire 3 days he was in there. Swore up and down he wasn't drunk driving. I'm pretty sure this was very late into New Year's Eve night. And by the way the officers spoke to him, he was a regular. I couldn't sleep or focus on my book. My Crocs had 32 holes in them and my cell was 14.5 bricks long. My dad is a prison officer in a max prison in the UK. He says the worst is when a pedo is put with everyone else. Once the others hear about it, it's 100% guaranteed that the dude is gonna be injured or killed, and then the screws will take their time getting to them. He said the worst he's seen was a guy was put in for raping and killing a newborn. 20 minutes later the dude had been sugared. Sugared is boiling water with sugar dissolved into it so it's thick. It also raises the boiling point of the solution. As water only boils at 100 C, it is much worse with sugar in it boiling at a higher temperature. I worked in a residential unit for intellectually disabled sex offenders. Makes you not want to walk out your own fucking front door. I worked for a state-run school. Alternative to jail for people with dual diagnosis of intellectual and mental issues. We had a home for just sex offenders, most of them for crimes against children. It made me sick just knowing what those animals did to children. I quickly left that job. One of them used to lure children to the fence so he could grab and molest them. The facility was located in a very small town and residential homes were right across the street. He would sit at that fence and just watch the local children all day. One would do anything to get his hands on any form of technology so that he could immediately look up CP. One was there because his father was a judge in another county. He had no disabilities but was there instead of an actual prison because he preyed upon his father's wife's nephew. For years he groomed and raped that poor boy. We were told his sentence had ended years before but that his dad refused to allow him to be released. Not me, but I know from friends in Africa that in their country, people caught poaching are often locked in a prison cell with a lion. Separated by metal bars of course. The lion is usually one being rehabbed, and has plenty of room to move around. It's a huge cell and 95% of it belongs to the lion. The inmate is put in a narrow strip against the wall. I thought that sounded like not much worse than regular prison, because the lion can't reach you, but they said until you've been in there, you can't imagine how terrifying it is, when you're close enough to a lion to smell its breath, and see its glowing eyes at night, and can't get away. The lion's food and water is put right against the separation bars, so it spends a good chunk of its time voluntarily near the criminal. When it's there, the inmate can't get more than 3 to 4 feet away from the lion. I'd be more scared of the stench than the lion. Do people have any idea what that cell would smell like after a few hours? I've been to jail, juvie and a JDOC, kiddie prison. My crazier stories are from juvie and JDOC surprisingly. We had a kid in juvie who was given a 23-month sentence for stealing a car. He tried to kill himself by falling off the bunk, which is only like 1.5 feet high, and onto the toilet. I'm guessing he thought it would break his neck. All over 23 months. He ended up on suicide watch where they put you in a single cell outside the guard room and they have a camera on you 24/7. Like how other juvies work, but in that cell is a button you have to press to request to move from the bed, use the toilet, etc. He ended up with a massive bump on his head the size of a cantaloupe. I've seen a kid who was 15 go into juvie on his court date. He was given 6 years for committing armed robbery and assault with a deadly weapon. I've never seen somebody give up on everything in one moment, but that kid's teen years were done for. In JDOC we had this kid named Junior who showed up and thought we were in a movie or something. First thing he did was try and fight one of the leaders of a gang and he came to regret it quick. They all jumped on him and beat the shit out of him. For his entire sentence not a day went by where he wasn't a punching bag for that gang. Any chance they got they were fucking him up. It got so bad the DOS ended up putting him in isopod for his own safety. Greater than in JDOC we had this kid named Junior who showed up and thought we were in a movie or something. First thing he did was try and fight one of the leaders of a gang and he came to regret it quick. I met some movie kid / some kid who read fight someone the first day in their threads on Reddit too. I walked into a pod in juvie, sat down at a table with some guys I already knew, and then out of fucking nowhere some little kid that I'd never seen before in my life flew at me and knocked me off my seat and we started rolling around punching each other. They pulled us apart and COs were like, "What happened? You know him? How do you know him?" I was like, I have no fucking idea what happened. Got to spend like 15 seconds in the pod before they put me in solitary. That guy ruined my fucking weekend. A really tragic story. My sister taught in a juvenile prison. There was a really troublesome juvenile inmate who would always brag that his uncle was the head of a gang in the adult prison next door. When the juvenile turned 18 he was transferred to the adult prison and the uncle sold him to a rival gang. The boy was molested and raped repeatedly until he hung himself. Holy fuck. I've only ever been in jail, but I met one of my friends there who has been in and out of prison for a heroin addiction, and one of his most traumatic memories is helplessly listening to his friend being raped in the cell next to him while the guards did nothing. I also heard about a woman who was giving birth in her cell, begging to go to a hospital, but the guards didn't believe her and didn't get her any medical help until the baby was like halfway out already. If she had had complications, they probably would have both died. Not prison, but did a month in jail. My cellmate would steal the candy I bought from the commissary that I had hidden under my pillow when I was sleeping. I caught him once and we got into an argument. He threatened to rip off my head and shit down my throat. This same guy was also making pruno in our cell. When I found out about it, I told him to dump it out. He said he would / did, but he just packed soap around it and hid it to hide the smell. I dumped it out on him when he was in the shower. During this same stint, a guy from solitary was brought into our block. He got in an argument with his cellmate about who his top or bottom bunk. Solitary confinement guy was about 6'3". Other guy was about 5'6". Other guy had just come from the shower, so only had a towel on with wet feet. Solitary guy threw one punch and absolutely laid him out. There was also a guy that came into our block that smuggled in Suboxone in his prison wallet. He shit it out in the shower, which pissed a bunch of us off. When the guards found out, they started to take him out and he tried to make a run for it.